Welcome back, everyone, and today I want you to listen very carefully because what I'm about to explain could directly affect your money, your health care, and even your right to vote, and most people have absolutely no idea this change even happened. If you mail tax returns, Social Security appeals, Medicare paperwork, benefit forms, or mail-in ballots, a quiet update from the Postal Service has just made mailing deadlines far more complicated than they used to be. And if you're not aware of this change, you could do everything right. Mail your paperwork on time, and still end up missing a deadline, delaying benefits, or having something rejected. This is one of those updates that doesn't sound dramatic at first, but once you understand it, you realize how serious it actually is. I want to be honest with you right from the start. I've been in that situation where you're racing against the clock, you finally drop an important envelope into the mailbox, and you feel that wave of relief wash over you. You think to yourself, it's done. I made the deadline. I don't have to worry anymore. For most of our lives, that assumption made sense. If you mailed something on time, the postmark usually matched that date, and that postmark was your proof. But that assumption is no longer something you can safely rely on, and that's exactly why this matters so much. Before we go any further, think about this for a second. Have you ever mailed something right at the deadline and assumed it was fine just because you sent it on time? Most people have. It's almost automatic. You trust the system, you trust the mailbox, and you trust the postmark. But the reality is that the system doesn't work the way it used to, and that one small difference can have very real consequences for everyday people, especially seniors, veterans, people with disabilities, and anyone who still relies on paper mail. For decades, the rule felt simple. If you dropped a letter into a blue mailbox or handed it to a postal clerk before a deadline, the postmark reflected that date. That postmark mattered legally. Courts relied on it. Government agencies relied on it. The IRS relied on it. Election offices relied on it. It was the official record showing when the Postal Service accepted your mail. That date could mean the difference between something being considered on time or late. But starting at the end of December, the Postal Service clarified something that had technically been true behind the scenes for a while, but that most of the public never really understood. The postmark date is now officially tied to when your mail is first processed by a postal facility, not when you drop it off in a mailbox, or even when you hand it over at a local post office. And that distinction, even if it's just one day, can completely change the outcome. Here's where people get tripped up, so I want to slow this down. Let's say you drop an envelope into a mailbox on Monday afternoon. You did your part. You mailed it before the deadline. But if that letter doesn't make it to a processing and distribution center until Tuesday, that's when the postmark gets applied. That means your envelope could show a Tuesday postmark, even though you mailed it on Monday. And in the eyes of the law, Tuesday is what counts, not Monday. Now imagine how this plays out in real life. You mail your tax return on April 15th, the deadline. You feel relieved, you think you're done, but the letter doesn't get processed until April 16th. The postmark now says April 16th, and suddenly your return is considered late. Even being one day late can trigger penalties if you owe taxes. That's not a small issue, especially for people living on fixed incomes. So why is this happening now? The answer has a lot to do with how the Postal Service operates today compared to how it operated years ago. Mail is no longer stamped at your local post office in most cases. Instead, postmarks are applied at large regional processing and distribution centers. Over the past several years, the Postal Service has been consolidating those centers as part of its effort to modernize operations and stabilize its finances. Letter mail volume has dropped significantly while package deliveries have increased, so USPS has changed transportation routes, reduced how often mail moves, and merged or closed processing facilities. Here's a detail that surprises a lot of people. Many post offices that used to send mail to processing centers twice a day now only send it once, often early in the morning. That means if you drop mail off later in the day, it may sit there overnight. Add in a weekend or a holiday, and that delay can grow even longer. Some local post offices are also hundreds of miles away from their assigned processing center, which adds more time before your mail is ever officially processed. From the Postal Service's point of view, they say this isn't a brand new rule, just a clarification of how postmarks have always technically worked. They argue that postmarks were always about processing, not drop-off. They also point out that customers who need certainty still have options, like asking for a hand-applied postmark at the counter or using certified or registered mail. But for everyday people who have relied on old assumptions for decades, this feels like a major shift. Now let's talk about who needs to pay the closest attention to this. Seniors who mail Social Security appeals, Medicare forms, or tax returns need to hear this clearly. Organizations that advocate for older Americans have already warned that the gap between drop-off dates and postmark dates is likely to become more common, not less. Veterans who submit VA benefit paperwork by mail need to be aware of this. People with disabilities who rely on mailed forms for time-sensitive benefits need to be aware of this. Anyone who votes by mail needs to understand this, no matter their political views. And even people who still pay bills by mail need to pay attention, because one late postmark could result in a late payment and a hit to your credit score. Taxes are one of the biggest areas where people could get burned by this change. The IRS treats your tax return as filed on time if it's postmarked by the deadline. So if your return is postmarked even one day late, it can be considered late. The late filing penalty can be 5% of what you owe per month, up to 25%. There's also a late payment penalty and daily interest. Even charitable donations can be affected. Mail a donation on December 31st, but if it's postmarked in January, it may count for the next tax year instead of the one you expected. Some people might say that hardly anyone mails tax returns anymore, but that's simply not true. Millions of people still file paper returns every year. For many seniors, this isn't about preference. It's about comfort, access, and trust in a system they've used their whole lives. That's why this change matters so much. Social Security and Medicare deadlines are another serious concern. Appeals in both systems have strict time limits. Miss a deadline, and your appeal can be denied automatically. That could delay benefits, coverage, or access to care. If you mail an appeal on the deadline day but it's postmarked the next day, you could lose your right to appeal entirely. For people who depend on these benefits to survive, that's devastating. Voting by mail is another area where this change has real consequences. Many states allow ballots to be counted if they arrive after Election Day, as long as they're postmarked by Election Day. If someone drops their ballot in the mail on Election Day but it isn't processed until the next day, that postmark could make the ballot invalid in those states. Election officials in several states have already warned voters to mail ballots earlier than they think they need to, especially if they live far from processing centers. So what do you actually do with this information? I don't want this to just sound scary. There are practical steps you can take to protect yourself. The first is simple but important. Mail important documents earlier than you think you need to. Build in a buffer, especially around weekends and holidays. If something is due on the 15th, aim to mail it by the 10th if possible. Second, if timing really matters, go inside the post office and ask for a hand-applied postmark. This is free, and it gives you clear proof of the date. Don't just drop the envelope in a mailbox. Hand it to a clerk and ask them to hand stamp it. That stamp can be your insurance. Third, consider using certified or registered mail for critical documents. Yes, it costs more, but it creates a paper trail with tracking and proof of mailing and delivery. Fourth, when possible, use electronic filing for taxes and government forms. Online submissions give you instant confirmation and remove the uncertainty altogether. If you vote by mail, request your ballot as early as your state allows and return it as early as you can. If your area offers official ballot drop boxes, use them instead of mailing your ballot back. That way, you know it's received on time. I know this feels like one more thing you shouldn't have to worry about, and that frustration is completely valid. For generations, the postmark was something you didn't even think about. It just worked. But now, the responsibility has shifted more onto you. This isn't about blaming anyone. It's about understanding how the system works now so you can protect yourself. The key takeaway is simple but important. The date you mail something and the date it's postmarked are no longer guaranteed to be the same. That one change can affect your money, your benefits, and your voice in an election. But knowing this gives you power. It allows you to plan ahead and avoid unnecessary problems. If this video helped you understand what's changed and why it matters, please support the channel by liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications. I share updates like this regularly to help you stay informed and protected. Leave a comment and tell me if you've ever mailed something right at the deadline and assumed it was fine, and whether this changes how you'll handle important mail going forward. I read every comment, and your experiences help others who are watching. And please share this video with anyone you know who still mails tax returns, benefit forms, or votes by mail. The more people who know about this now, the fewer people will be caught off guard later. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.